Networking. How many people don't really care where you are right now? You don't really know where you are? All right, we got one that's honest. That's good.
Well, the third category is who wants to learn more about this stuff, and we're hoping that you're going to teach us that.
Excellent. All right. Yeah? Cool. Excellent. So my name is Dan Wilkins, JX, if you want to put me on Twitter. I am an expert. Except for FX, seriously, not even, okay, there we go. I'm an expert except for FX. No, I'm an expert at CLEs. Does anybody know what a CLE is? It's a career-limiting event. When I first started at my current job, we're an ISP for schools. And they were planning, oh, we're not getting our bandwidth. I'm at a networking role at this point, just newly started out. They're like, well, go do a throughput test with this tool. The only IP address I knew was for our core server, which at that time was an alpha server running OpenVMS. Apparently it had a 10 meg card on it. I didn't know that. I sent 100 meg over it for about 10 minutes and brought down our entire company, fiscal and everything. Thankfully that's been fixed now. But that was fun to go to my boss. They thought it was an attack from the outside. It wasn't. But, and I brought down our company a couple of times since then, but those have all been planned. I'm a Christian husband and father, and it goes in those three orders as far as order of importance. My wife and I have been married for 8 years now. We just had a baby actually a month ago today. It is our fourth. So obviously I have a lot of time on my hands and get to do a lot of this stuff on free time. Done a little bit of everything, but right now I'm in networking and specifically network security. Before I get into the actual presentation, I'm part of a group called OISF, Ohio Information Security Forum. Anybody? Yeah. Oh, there's Daryl. Daryl is the one that started it. Daryl Highland. You might not know the name, but you would know the mustache because it's epic. It's a great group of guys. We get together once a month and just get to talk about anything security related. So if you're in the Dayton, Ohio region at all and you ever want to hit us up on the second Thursday, please let us know. So brief overview of IPv6. Began development in 1993, so it is actually now 20 years old this year. It wasn't finished until 1999. There are actually 340 undecillion IP addresses available in it. Which is a really big number that we'll get to on the next slide. It has the potential for more security. There's some common myths out there like mandated IPsec and other things like that. They are unfortunately still myths in marketing terms. But we'll get into that as well. There's some interesting flaws with IPv6 that have really hung around since IPv4 was here. So some things are the same. You know, an app layer attacker, if you're attacking Java, you're still going to get in whether it's IPv4 or IPv6. It's still Java, so it's still vulnerable. So some things stay the same with IPv6. Most of you, if you ever looked at IPv6 or seen a presentation, you've probably seen this slide or on our webpage. If IPv4 is represented by an iPod Classic, IPv6 is the entire Earth. Anybody know how many IP addresses in IPv4? Roughly,
4 billion.
Yeah, 4.2 billion IP addresses. 340 undecillion in scientific notation is actually 3.4 times 10 to the 38th. So if anybody remembers science class, if something's written in scientific notation, it's either extremely small or it's really huge. And in this case, it's really huge. It is a 128-bit address scheme, so whereas IPv4 was 32, we're actually at a 2 to 128 power. So why do we need it? Why is it coming? Or for some countries in some areas, it's already here. Well, according to the IANA, the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, they actually ran out of IPv4 addresses a little while ago. They actually in 2011. There are 5 RIRs. They still have IP addresses depending on which one you're associated to. I don't know if you guys can see. Is that big enough? Looks like it hopefully is big enough for you guys, but 2 of them have already ran out. Asia Pacific and European have ran out, and our estimated is by 2014 for here that we will run out of IPv4 address space. Now, will IPv4 hang around for a little while? Yeah, certainly, but it is coming. AppNIC, they are handing out IPv6 for any new mobile customers, which really seems like the logical place to go is have mobile phones get IPv6 address space. Eventually we'll be doing the same thing.
Verizon already is.
Is Verizon already doing IPv6?
I have one right now.
That's awesome. Is that only if you're connected to LTE, or is that
Yes,
everything?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Address format changes, obviously. So IPv4, we're all familiar with. It looks very familiar, and then IPv6 looks ridiculous, depending on how it's written. So that first example is quite large. And thankfully, there's some different notation that we can do to make it look a lot more manageable. You can take out all the zeros, and then if you have multiple sets of zeros, you can just take all, you can only do it once, but you can take them out and put in a double colon. So you can see the same IP address is actually reduced down to a lot smaller right there. Loopback address is actually shorter than IPv6. So if anybody's ever like, oh, IPv6 is too long, I like IPv4. Well, actually, loopback is actually shorter than IPv6, so you can throw that in there. Subnetting looks a little different. And actually, I think subnetting is going to be awesome for IPv6, as much as it can be. So everybody's familiar with Google's public DNS 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4. They actually kept it fairly similar. You'll see at the top, I've got the 2001 4860, 4860, and then the last 4 digits are the same for IPv6. And I've got kind of a breakdown. So the first 6 characters are going to be what RIR you come from. So because Google is mostly US-based, or is US-based, theirs comes from RN. And then after that, you've got the /32, the 60 there represents the ISP. So Google is large enough to be an ISP, but if most of you guys go to Aaron and request one for your company, they're going to give you an entire /48 generally. And so most of you would see something more like this, this third line right here. Third line there. So that is going to represent your site. That's going to be a /48. Subnet. So you can still subnet kind of however you want. If you want to break it up into very, very small chunks, you can do that. It's going to break some stuff. So IPv6 is heavily relies on auto configuration, and that is based off of being a /64. So while you can subnet to your heart's desire, there's really not a lot of need for it, thankfully, with the sheer address space we have. And you might break some stuff, but if you really like subnetting, go for it. So there are actually, if you get a /48 as your site, you're going to have 65,000 different /64s to give out to people. So DNS comes into a lot of play, and so does DHCP. And if you think about it, the amount of address space you're going to have is you're going to have DNS. A, because nobody's going to be able to remember their IP addresses anymore, unless you really get lucky with how you set up your subnets. You're going to need to use DNS. And we can use this to our advantage, both from an attacking standpoint as well as defensive standpoint. We can use DNS to our advantage. DHCP, like I said, IPv6 is set up to do auto configuration. It's not necessary. You can use DHCP, and the downside to use auto configuration is there's no name servers automatically given. So most likely everybody's still going to be running DHCP. So how does this actually affect security? Where does any of this actually matter in security? So traditional NAT is deprecated. There have been a couple RFCs that have tried to bring it back through things like network prefix translation. And there's some things out there currently in order to allow tunneling over IPv4, so there's some NATing. But for the most part, NATing is going to be gone. Everybody's going to be just a straight IPv6 address, which is going to affect some of our traditional firewalls. All modern firewalls should support IPv6 already. As to if the people have configured it to block IPv6 the same way they do their IPv4, that's going to be on a site-per-site basis. So all ports that are blocked on IPv4 might not be blocked on IPv6. Also, dual stack. So how many people actually leave dual stack on their computers? So like Windows 7, Vista, things like that, Windows 8 as well, come with IPv6 turned on as well. How many people leave those on? Okay, so a fair amount of people. Now, are you using IPv6 or you just leave them on because they're on in the image or whatever you use? You're using it? Okay. All right. For those that aren't using it, and we'll look at a couple of my demos are going to be based off having dual stack on, is it can cause problems, and we've noticed that at my job as well. So dual stack and IPv6 tunneling specifically can give you an egress out of the, or give the attackers an egress out of your network. So Teredo, which is the way Windows tunnels out IPv4, is primarily over UDP41, but it is dynamic, so if it can't get out over that, it will change the port until it finds one that will work. So if somebody happens to get on your network and they want to start tunneling everything out, they can use Teredo to easily tunnel stuff out. So it can be a problem, as well as having router advertisements, which we'll get into in a second. So Reconnaissance. So how in the world are you supposed to scan a subnet in IPv6? H.D. Moore talked about this.
I'm sorry, can you go back to the point on the previous slide?
Yes.
So which one is the weakest link?
It's going to depend on configuration. Most likely IPv6 if they're not actually using it. Eventually it won't be once people have their firewall rules configured correctly. But depending on their firewall, if they've never touched it, it's possible they're allowing all ports open on IPv6, whereas IPv4 they make sure they keep their apples under control. So Reconnaissance, like I said, H.D. Moore kind of touched on this a little bit. You know, they've done some awesome stuff with scanning the entire internet, but IPv6 comes around. That's a whole other ballgame. So one subnet, like I said, is 2 to the 64th. That is 2 times greater than what we have the entire IPv4 network for one subnet. So Google would have 65,000 of those. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit of time to scan through. So Nmap is actually IPv6 enabled. So if you really want to try, you can go in Nmap and attempt to scan the entire IPv6 address space. And has anybody ever tried that? I think somebody should. And just see what happens. But it will take forever. Now there's some really cool tools, and the Hacker's Choice has produced a lot of really cool IPv6 tools. We're going to demo a couple of those. One of them is Detect New IPv6, and it is a tool that you would run in if you can drop a device on the network, internal network, or you get control. You run this tool, and the way IPv6 works is it has duplicate address detection. So when an IPv6 address joins, it says, hey, I'm here, does anybody have this IP address? And this will just log that and keep track, and then you can get reports of all the new IP addresses. This becomes very important because you can't just scan a subnet anymore like you used to with IPv4. DNS recon becomes so much more vital. So instead of an A record, now it's quad A records. So you're going to want to use something like DNS map or DNS sec blocker, and find a good listing of IPv6 address space. So spoofing. So mandated IPsec, one of those common myths, means man in the middle is irrelevant nowadays. Well, the downside to IPsec on IPv6 is it's mandated to be supported. It's not mandated to be running. So the problem we run into is it still requires somebody to actually set the IPsec up. That's available for most people in IPv4, and not everybody does that just because they either don't know how or they don't feel like it. So I don't think that's going to completely make it irrelevant. I think man in the middle is still going to be there, but ARP is gone. So that at least makes ARP spoofing more difficult. Well, now there's Behavioral Discover Protocol, which is essentially ARP. It still has blind trust. You can still set yourself up as the router, and Windows 7 will be like, okay, well, I'll just send everything through to you. This is all done through ICMP version 6. NDP and auto configuration is done through that. And so we're going to do a quick demo of, it's one of the tools that the Hacker's Choice has released for the IPv6 address space. So we're just going to set up a fake router. And so let's switch up. Let's see if you guys keep me. You guys hopefully didn't see my super secret password. Password 1. It's password. That's what. How's that look?
Looks good.
All right. Now I got a Windows 7 as well, and all the resolution stuff. What's that? All the resolution stuff. All right, so you can see right now, I've just got a link local. I'm not running any kind of switch or anything like that. If you want, there are Cisco emulators, or you can run a router. You can do Ipv6 testing, which I do highly recommend before you roll it out. So I'm just going to actually copy that. So you can see right now, all I've got is this link local. It's just built in. It's kind of like the 169.0 space. So we're going to do. One fun thing about Ipv6 is now you get a couple letters, so you can work on some funny address space. So yeah, beef, dead, dude, do whatever you want. So we are, hold on 1 second, let me look. We're going to crash this Windows 7 machine.
We lost the fight.
Are you serious? Come on. Let's get frustrated. All right, did you get me back?
Yeah.
Yes, moving windows.
All right, so this is going to crash this Windows 7 box pretty quickly, unfortunately. I don't have a ton of memory, it's just 1 gig because it's virtual. But let's see if we can. Four do that. So remember how I said I didn't sacrifice a goat today? This might be that situation. And it is not sending out the packets. Okay, so we'll talk about what it's actually doing and not actually doing. So router advertisements. So Windows 7, Windows XP, I've heard, actually Windows 8 is supposed to handle this better, but router advertisements is part of Ipv6. And this is essentially using the NDP or doing ARP spoofing. So you can send out router advertisements using fake router or fake underscore router 6. You put in your interface, you put in what you want to advertise, and it will send out router advertisements, a lot per second. And Windows 7 does this great thing, it just takes them, and it'll keep on taking them, and keep on taking them, and keep on taking them until it crashes. XP does the same thing. If you can catch the Windows 7 box before it fully crashes, you can do an ipconfig-all, and you'll see millions of Ipv6 routers advertised for you. So if you want, you know what, no, I'm doing this wrong. I'm sorry, hold on one second. I was doing spoofing. Sorry, it did work. Hey, I was on the wrong slide. Okay, now you can see dead dude is showing up. Are you able to see that? It is showing up. Yes. Excellent, I was on the wrong slide. So it did work, hooray, the goat was successful. So now you can see that dead dude is the proper Ipv6, and default gateway is now, I'll do an ipconfig, 72F2, 72F2. So I now set myself up as their default gateway. So it just blindly accepts that. Now we get into the flood. Amplification attacks. These are the really easy ones to do with Ipv6. And these are not going to be amplification attacks you use from outside, hopefully. If people are allowing IP or ICMP version 6 in through their firewall, then you can probably do this over the internet. But if they're allowing that through their firewall, you're probably going to get in any number of ways. So you can do a network scan DOS using NDP. Because of the subnet size, scans can actually exhaust the router's resources trying to process the NDP request. So if you scan a large enough subnet, you can crash the router just by doing a ping scan. You can also take advantage of the multicast address. So one of the things with Ipv6 is it has multicast address. It has multiple of them. You've got FF02::1 is going to be for all nodes, and then you also, if you do the ::2, you can do to all routers. You can do THC flood router 6. This is the neighbor advertisement flood. This is the one that's going to crash it. I'm going to see if we can catch it, so I can show the default gateways before it actually floods all the way. But I don't know if I'll be able to.
Why would they build a companion purposely flood and crash?
Well, no, this is flood router, fake router. All those are part of the Hacker's Choice toolkit.
Oh, okay.
So these are not built in. This is just a toolkit. It's built into Kali. If you want to play around with it on yourself, it's a great toolkit. Router 6. This one's a little easier. Before I run that command. Alright, so you can see CPU usage is pretty low percent. I don't know if I stopped it in time, but it's going to take a little. So CPU is pegged out. Like I said, it's unfortunate. I'm hoping that it'll actually let us do the command, that it'll actually show the command before it completely crashes. Hopefully I stopped the fast stuff. If you see, it wasn't running long. Each dot is 100 packets. It crashes pretty fast, so XP and Windows 7 will both do that. They just blindly accept router advertisements, and they'll just add until they die. Windows 8, from what I've heard, I haven't been able to test it on Windows 8, but from what I've heard, they actually have made it so it won't completely crash when you do this. Now this is going to affect the entire internal network. So if you are testing this and you're using like VirtualBox like I'm using, make sure you're not like actually on your LAN. Make sure you're on an internal network or a host-only network. That would be a quick way to bring down your internal network if you're allowing SMP through. All right, it's working its way through. It should be out soon, and we'll be able to see the list of gateways. So like I said, they will just accept it until they die. This is going to be LAN-wide. I've had schools call up, hey, our network's just dead. All our computers are crashing. Well, are you running IP version 6? And well, I mean, we're not running it internally, but it's turned on. And so I'll have them do like a Wireshark capture off of here to sure enough, it's just ICMP just flowing. And so, or ICMP version 6. And so it's, if you're not actually using Ipv6, so a couple of you are using Ipv6, obviously don't turn off Ipv6 in that case. But if you're not using IP version 6 and you don't have an immediate plan to go to, I would highly recommend just turning it off. Just on your base image, it does come on by default in most. All right, we'll come back to this because people might take a question. Yes.
The way to harm yourself in this attack would be to.
So I've got a slide that has a couple of things you can use for advice. Something called RA Guard, I believe by Cisco. There are ways around it. The Hacker's Choice already released an add-on to try and get around RA Guard, so it's Router Advertisement Guard. It's supposed to help prevent this kind of DOS. I haven't played with RA Guard. It's from Cisco, so I'm sure it's expensive.
That's just a feature on their switches.
Is it? Do you need special licensing or anything, or is it standard licensing on other switches?
You just turn it on.
Cool. All right, there you go.
Does this work on Linux and OS X attack?
The attack?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Linux.
I do, but it's my Kali box. I don't know if I can attack
Is
my
there a way to
attack.
hard code the IPv6 gateway?
Is there a way to hard code the Windows? Oh, there we go. All right, it's good. So this is why the PC is pretty much new. So through DHCP or something like that, you can set one that's given, but unless you're stopping the router advertisement,
There's also security in DPD.
there is security in the PC. So there are things you can do to help prevent it. There's also another one. I'm not going to demo it just for time's sake, but you can do a Smurf. There's a tool called Smurf6, which is essentially you send a ping with the source IP address of the item that you want to go after, whether it's a router or another host, and you send it to the all nodes multicast address. And so if the nodes are set up to actually respond to those, they'll all start pinging back to that address. And so you can bring down.
It's DDoS.
Essentially, yeah, you're setting up everything else because the source IP address, they're all going to be like, oh, okay, I'll ping you back. Now, like I said, ICMP, this should not be allowed from the outside. All right, this should not be able to be done. And if you're already inside the network, you've probably got better things to do than DOS somebody. But if you want to, you can at least try it and have some fun. So what can we do? So solutions. So most of the problems lie in core implementation. There's a lack of planning or no knowledge. So a lot of it's going to be, your boss walks in one day. If you're in the network side of things, your boss walks in, hey, we need IPv6, and we need to support it like tomorrow. And in that case, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to plan your network out great. If it's mandated for you and you don't have the training, you don't have the time, it's probably going to lead to poor implementation. And that's where most of these could come into effect. Like I said, most of these attacks, you shouldn't necessarily be able to do from outside. If you are, they're implemented, the network's implemented well. So from an attacking standpoint, things you can use. Like I said, the Hacker's Choice IPv6 toolkit that I demoed, they've got some awesome tools, and they've got a lot more that I didn't even go into. You can use Scapy if you want to create your packets yourself. You can create the packets and send them custom. You can use Nmap. Like I said, Nmap scans are going to be difficult to do just because of the size of the subnet, but if you can do it targeted, you can do a little better. So from defense, like you mentioned, there's SEND, there's secure neighbor discovery, there's RA guard from Cisco, and you can do logging and best practices. If you set up the network with advanced planning and you lock things down properly, you shouldn't run into as many problems. So test it. There's a couple of tunnel brokers that I have listed if you want to test these for yourself and actually run IPv6 over IPv4. Some ISPs actually are doing it. I know AT&T Uverse, they're offering IPv6 to your home, so you might be able to do it from your home. But Hurricane Electric is...
If you're running Uverse, I've got some clients that do. Should I cut off IPv4 like you just run on 6?
No.
I would not recommend that.
Definitely
Yeah, there's not everything's on IPv6 yet, and so no, I wouldn't recommend turning it off.
We actually skipped the stack.
No, I know you did. That's why. Got it.
So if you have IPv6 available, is when you actually turn off IPv4, I would say not yet. I mean, eventually, hopefully, we'll get to that point. But right now, it's not ready. But you can use these tunnel brokers. As with any kind of tunnel, if you don't necessarily own the equipment on the other end of the tunnel, don't necessarily trust everything going across it. Hopefully I don't have to explain that to you guys too much, but those are two of the highly recommended ones that I have. There's different tunnel technologies. 6.4 is one, Teredo is another one. That's the one that's supported by default with Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows Vista, things like that. There's a lot of other tunnel technologies as well. But I want to open it up to questions and answers. This is some of the references, some different RFCs you can read, different information you can get from RN and IANA, and also Cisco with our IPv6. So questions and answers.
So there are some tools you've shown that can point systems at your own box as their router. Does these attack toolkits or any other tools enable you to actually create a gateway easily so you can maintain connections and the illusion everything's working fine?
So you can make it's almost a persistent.
Be the IPv6 to 4 gateway yourself, and let them still reach their destination.
Well, I mean, yeah, just like with ARP spoofing or something, you could do IP forwarding, and so yeah, they could not even know they're going through you. So you could set it up with the fake router 6 is the tool that I demoed here, but there's others as well. So yeah, they wouldn't even know. They would still be able to get out to the internet. Just it'd be man in the middle. So you can do whatever you normally do with man in the middle. There's a great talk actually last year that dudes from TrustWave Spiral Labs put on about man in the middle. Yes.
So for IPv4, ARP cache poisoning, you usually recommend ARP inspection in case you're sleeping. With IPv6, as far as Cisco goes, you know.
Yeah. So the question is, with IPv4, you have things that you can do to kind of inspect the ARP and hopefully prevent the poisoning. With IPv6, something like SEND, the Secure Neighbor Discovery Protocol. Yeah, that would be probably the first step in it. From what I've been able to read, it's not highly implemented, but it is effective.
Does that have any prerequisites as far as like DHCP snooping for ARP inspection, or is that something?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
You had mentioned that subnetting is relatively optional, not really recommended anymore, but generally with IPv4 you set up VLANs and then you would stick that subnet in that VLAN and you run it through a router. And that's how you kind of manage your network. You segment it off. So what would you do with IPv6?
Yeah, so with IPv6, so with subnetting, you would use it for VLANs on IPv4. What would you do in IPv6? I mean, you can still subnet. It depends on how much address space you have, but you can. So with most implementations that I've seen, is you would have different number schemes you would use for the buildings and things like that, but they would still be on that /64. So they wouldn't be broken up like they are with IPv4.
So would you then do static?
That's the recommended list.
Static
But you can.
or somehow have the DHCP server understand requesting what?
So DHCP, most people are probably still going to run it just for the name servers. How are you implementing it at your place?
We got more than /64.
What was that?
We got more than /64.
So he's got one of those /64.
Yeah, so just something that you get. One place I got 48 and another got 56. So there's 2 subnets that way.
Okay. Keeping the /64 as recommended for each subnet?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. Does that answer your question? Does that work?
Kind of.
I mean, it kind of means that every home has their own 64.
Yeah, so most of that,
So everybody's house
if you
has
get
/64 of IPv6.
yeah, your house will have a /64 and IPv6 because there's so many IP addresses, they're just giving them out. So, I mean, it's crazy to think about that you'll have an order of magnitude greater than the entire IPv4 available for your house.
But you need more than one subnet built in your provider.
Yeah.
To get IPv6.
Let me get him and I'll come back to him. Yes, sir.
So Aaron's recommendation in their service area is for an individual customer to be assigned to /48 regardless. Obviously, some of the more residential providers are against this because they've built business models on IPv4 where address scarceness, they can basically make money. Oh, you need 3 addresses? Okay, give me $20 extra a month or whatever. Right. So they're resisting that. So it looks like what you said, things are going to settle on getting a /64 per a home network. However, if you're a business customer, you're supposed to get a /48 per site. So if you have multiple physical buildings, you can justify a much larger assignment. So, like a small company that has maybe 3 or anything less than 16 physical locations, you can get a /40 without really much effort.
That's what Facebook has.
You got to remember, if you have a /48, that's 65,000 /64s. And like you said, if you have multiple /48, that just expounds. So certainly, the IP scarceness, you should be paying a lot of money to your ISP and more for getting outside IP addresses. Let me come to him and then we'll get you.
You had mentioned that there's some issues running in dual mode, and you mentioned one. Are there other issues we should be aware of, particularly from a security standpoint?
So the easiest one to take advantage of, the issues with running dual stack, easiest one to take advantage is the one I demoed where you just crash the box. The other one would be something like setting up a fake router and getting it to route through you. Other than that, there probably are, but not that I know.
So, and then as you mentioned, it gives the hackers traditional, non-traditional exploits.
Yeah, so if IPv6 is still on and they get on your box, no matter how they get on your box, they can use router advertisements to tell all the other boxes that have dual stack turned on, hey, I'm now the router, and link everything through you. And then tunnel it out to Rado or something like that, to tunnel it out UDP41 or whatever dynamic port it gets assigned. Yeah, so it's definitely still not recommended if you're not using it. Evan?
I'm just going to make a comment. You talked about filtering ICMP-V6. Be careful that there is still path MPU discovery in IPv6. So if you just blindly drop all ICMP firewall, you're going to break path MPU discovery for Ethernet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anything else?
It's a way to send out like broadcast network again.
With IPv6? Yeah, so broadcast address, there's actually multiples. You can do all nodes, which is the colon 1, or you can do just the routers, so broadcast all routers that are on the network, and that would be with 2. So it's kind of broken up, and you have a little more choice, but there is still broadcast.
What would I use, like,
I'm sorry?
What would I use, like, if you had powers, would I just use, like, an OpenSig?
Yeah, so, let me see if I have it on my slides. Yeah, so you would send a packet to this FF02 colon 1, and that's the all nodes, so that's essentially a broadcast address. And you can use, right, you could use SCAPE to either form your own packet, or you could ping that address, and be able to do it that way. Yes, sir.
Go back to the defensive slide.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming out. Great rest of the day.
So many times.